There's this really foundational concept in narrative filmmaking called the 180-degree rule, or sometimes referred to as the line, which isn't a hard and fast rule, but understanding it is really, really important because breaking it by accident is one of the most surefire ways to come across as just a complete amateur. The 180-degree rule is essentially a rule for where you are allowed to put your camera when getting multiple shots of two people talking. And I have been meaning to make a video about it for ages. So to encourage me to do it, I decided that I'd make it a little bit extra fun and just play with some toys. I am a massive child. To understand the 180-degree rule, it first helps to think a little bit about what it's like to actually watch two people talking. If you were watching these two people having a conversation, you'd probably start by looking at one of them, turning your head, looking at the other one, turning your head back. And you could well shoot a conversation like this with the camera panning back and forth across from one person to another. But obviously shooting a movie like that is quite limiting. Maybe you want to be looking at one of them whilst the other one's talking. Maybe you don't want all of that dead space in the swish in between the two characters. You might want to shoot in standard coverage, which is a thing that I've talked about before. I think the link is up there somewhere. So to do that, you shoot everything from one side, and then you shoot everything from the other side, and you cut back and forth, and your brain fills in the look back and forth. So any two shots of people looking at each other, talking, the brain will stitch them together and be like, cool, I get this. This is two people in the same space. Now this effect works basically as long as the characters are looking opposite directions. If one of them is looking screen left to screen right, one of them needs to be looking from screen right to screen left. This means that any pair of shots where they're looking in opposite directions will work together. That includes shots like this one and this one, or this shot with this shot, or even like this shot with this shot. So the 180-degree rule basically dictates the shots that you can't get, the shots that don't work in this kind of having your brain fill in one side to the other. For example, this shot does not work with this shot, because the characters are both looking in the same direction. So it doesn't feel like they're looking at each other anymore. It feels like you've gone from standing one side of them to suddenly standing the other side. And that is because they have crossed the line. You've got to imagine a line going between 2 points, which are in the middle of these two characters. You can only put your camera one side of that line. Any shot that you get of the two characters will cut together, provided it doesn't cross the line. So this is the simplest explanation of the 180-degree rule. However, it gets more complicated. So if we go back to that hypothetical conversation that you were watching earlier, looking from left to right to left to right, you could theoretically just walk around to the other side and then look at the conversation from the other side. It's not like you get to here or you try to walk through the middle and suddenly you can't. And this is reflected in the 180-degree rule as well. Whilst you're not allowed to cross the line in a cut, you can cross the line in a camera move. For example, cutting from this to this doesn't work. However, if you start here and if you do a camera move like this and then have a new shot over here, that works just fine. And the reason it does work is because it's essentially simulated walking around to the other side of the conversation. However, this is a very however heavy video. You can break this rule pretty easily and get away with it if your audience has enough visual information to be able to properly orient themselves. They're not really gonna notice that you're crossing the line. For example, if characters are very close together, you can get away with it pretty easily. That's what I did in Better Than You in the opening scene. Films like Whiplash cross the line every time Andrew Neiman gets slapped, just to show how utterly disorienting that experience was for him. And if I remember right, there's a scene in Selma where two characters are essentially having an argument about one of them's ability to register to vote, and they both look like they're looking the same way. And this is kind of metaphorically resonant because one of them is not playing by the rules. They're not trying to have an honest discussion with this other person. They're just trying to shut them down. So breaking the 180-degree rule, you can do it for the sake of art. Good, I think that just about covers everything that I wanted to say about the 180-degree rule. If you did find it useful, feel free to subscribe. I get a video out every other week, sometimes every week, about the tools of narrative cinema. So if that sounds like something that'll be interesting, you freaking ring the bell. Hasta luego. I will see you when I see you.